Council Group Quarterly Financial Report. First, we have Gina and Dan, and we have Kevin next to me. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, everyone. My name is Dan Keys, and I am the Manager of Group Accounting and Reporting and Financial Control. And with me today is Gina, who is our Group Accountant. And we are here today to present the Q3 Group results. And the way that this works is that we present the group result so that this committee will understand the materiality and the context of the group result, to then frame some of your questions that you may ask each of the CCOs and the parent as they come to this table. So to run through briefly our presentation, I think you have some slides up with you and on the table in front of you. Firstly, going to the summary slide. To run through briefly, the operational expenditure is reasonably well controlled, so within 0.14% of the budget, as well as that operating revenue is reasonably close to budget as well, as within 0.11%. We'll touch briefly on the CapEx performance against budget, which is behind, and also run through the debt parameters, which are still within their threshold. So then to run through the key performance highlights on the next slide, we have...
Here's the clicker.
Oh, there it is. Thank you, Gina.
Your mate's got it.
One more. Excellent. So in terms of employee benefits, overall the group was favourable against budget by $6 million. And then if we break that down between parent and each of its CCOs, you'll see Auckland Council was $23 million favourable to budget, with each of the CCOs, aside from Panuku Development Auckland, contributing an amount of unfavourable variance. And then moving to the capital expenditure for the group, you will see that the group is $240 million behind our phased budget, and you will see each of the entities, being the CCOs and council parent, each contributing an amount of unfavourable CapEx under delivery, as well as ATEED has a small favourable variance as well. We also noted in our group review of the results that Regional Facilities Auckland revenue was lower than what was approved, and also the cost had not reduced proportionately. So if we considered that revenues and expenses were aligned, then unfortunately one was in one direction and one was in a different. Moving then to just briefly to run through this statement of financial performance. This is where we talked briefly in the opening slides around total revenue and expenses being largely in line with budget. We do have some noteworthy commentaries across the group, specifically around, as this committee will be aware, there was a budget reclassification for City Rail Link as the accounting treatment was determined after the budget was set, as well as higher vested assets revenue of $119 million and a reduced regulatory revenue of $5 million. On the expenses side, you'll see that we had reported in Q2 to this committee that the weather tightness provision increased by $69 million, as well as on offsetting that we had some reduced depreciation expense of $44 million, and we've got our group favourable result on employee benefits of $6 million. We also contributed to the group result $10 million of reduced consultancy and professional fees. As well as that, we've got some other realised gains and losses down the bottom, which result in our fair value of derivative swaps. On the balance sheet side, we have increased our total assets by 1.1, which comes from an element of debtors, which is due to the advanced recognition of our rates receivables at the start of the year, as well as our investment in CapEx along the balance sheet. In the total liabilities space, we have increased by $549 million compared to the opening of the year. 430 of that comes from gross debt, as well as our derivative financial instruments position. This slide, while very busy, if you've got the detail, does show exactly where we've put all of that CapEx funding, and as expected, the majority of that falls into transport. And moving to our credit rating financial ratio, you'll see that as at June, we were sitting at 251, and we've moved up to 261.5. The reason for that is, while at June there was a small amount of PTOM, or the Public Transport Operating Model bus contracts that Auckland Transport have signed, there's now about $470 million of operating lease commitments sitting inside the March result, which has contributed to a higher ratio than previously reported. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions about the group result.
Mr. Walker?
Sure, and it may be more appropriate for me to ask one of the questions later, but just in terms of the lower than expected development contributions, and also the comment around building consents being down, I'm assuming that there's is there a relationship between building consents and development contributions? I mean, I understand development contributions are more around subdivision than building consents, but I'd just like your comment on the link, because obviously it is of concern that contributions are down and consents also.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. Just with the chair, I might just comment that there is a presentation by the parent following shortly where they do touch on building consents and resource consents. So it may be, if the chair wants to place that question with them.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay, and maybe my other question can wait till then as well then. All right?
Elaine? Oh, it's Councillor Cooper, sorry.
Thanks. Thank you. With the vested assets to City Rail Link, so that's the moving across of our assets into the CRL company, I guess. And he's saying there that we've had to vest another 119 million. Is that what that means? Higher vested assets vested away from us because it's taken away off our assets.
So what we're saying there is, if so the vested assets revenue is assets that are vested to council group by developers and such like.
Oh, sorry.
So it's
The
two
other way
different
around.
variances. That one's not related to CRL.
Okay, so we're saying that we had less vested than we expected, and will that be something, for example, a developer hasn't finished, they haven't quite, it might come over into this new financial year?
So it's the other way around, Councillor. It's we've got an additional $119 million of vested assets revenue compared to budget.
Sorry, so why, so we put the negative around there?
So the negative.
It's showing us means it'll cost to us because of the consequential OPEX.
So this section is talking about revenue. So we've got an unfavourable variance overall of 110, and so we've got an unfavourable variance from the CRL budget reclassification or accounting treatment confirmation of negative 229, and then that is offset by 119 of
the other
extra
way.
vested
Got it.
assets to
Yep,
equal
so that's your
110.
10.
Yep.
Got it, thanks.
Councillor Stewart?
Yeah, can you just tell me the other, the capital expenditure for other, what sort of things fall into the other? It's on page 15.
So that would be anything that's not part of those core delivery items, so specifically likely to be things like IT and ICT.
Just through the chair, if you go back 2 slides, it's actually got the full detail. It's the orange box within the graph.
Yeah.
Town centres, fleet replacement.
On the presentation, which is on
So
there.
just past the statement of financial position slide, which we can put up on there. There we go.
It's huge, 233.
Page 24.
Yeah.
Page 24 on the agenda.
Oh, we're a quiet bunch today. Councillor Filippone.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm unsure whether this question should be asked here or not, but I'm going to ask it anyway, through you, Chair. With the markets and what's happening overseas, and I asked this question of the CEO a few weeks ago in light of the trade or possible trade wars with the US and with Europe and Mexico and Canada. Now, the markets around there are shifting, sort of losing, gaining, but losing again. What effect would that have on our investment overseas in regards to what is happening.
And
Because I'm looking at our credit rating and I don't know. This is why I'm asking the question. I know this is just in this little part, but it's around the whole financial market and any effect that it will have on Auckland Council with our investments around credit rating. Are you seeing anything that would have a market effect on that, Kevin?
Yeah, through the chair, if I can handle that. There's a couple of components to that. One is the attractiveness of New Zealand and New Zealand Inc. as well as local government New Zealand. And what we found out when we did the Euro issue at the beginning of the year was very, very attractive. People are actually looking for stable and boring, where they want them to invest their funds. So we actually picked up, we were oversubscribed in the Euro stock, so we got some good pricing on that. The second piece is, regardless of what's happening in the overseas market and the impact it might have on interest rates, we do enter into hedging arrangements to protect those interest rates, and we make them fixed. So average debt around about 7 years at the moment, so we've got a good level of surety around how much interest we'll be paying, regardless of international movements.
Cool, thank you.
So it's more borrowings than investments, Councillor?
Yeah, look, just noticing what's happening overseas and the markets and how far they're shifting, they're losing. I mean, it will have an effect. I'm just glad around the 7 year.
Yep.
That's good. Thank you.
Councillor Hill?
Through you, Chair. Thank you both for the presentation. Just a question on the debt to revenue ratio. Obviously in the 10-year budget we see it tail off in the mid to outer years, which is good, but with a jump like that in 1 year, is there anything you see we need to change track on? Are we at risk in the next 2 years of peaking out or anything?
yes, so the additional increase in the credit ratio is a well-known fact, and it was incorporated into the LTP, so that the LTP starting position includes the PTOM adjustment, and then on top of that, each of the entities around the group are very aware of any contracts they sign that might impact that credit rating ratio. So there is guidelines around the group where any significant contracts entered into should be discussed centrally, so that we can make sure we manage that that credit rating issue. And then in terms of projects and capex in the pipeline, that's very well modelled across the LTP, which you have seen through your LTP discussions, which is the key metric that's managed throughout that delivery.
Okay, and the other question on that, there's a lot of people out there who've been saying, why don't you just borrow more instead of raising rates or the fuel tax, other things. Is that it's sort of self-imposed, but what is the knock-on effect if we kept borrowing without increasing our revenue and we breach the debt to revenue ratio?
Absolutely, and Councillor, it is quite a big impact. So if we were to breach our ratings covenant, our ratings threshold, then we would likely receive a downgrade by one or more of our rating entities, which would change our interest expense significantly and also impact the rest of New Zealand, in that the LGFA or Local Government Financing Authority is dependent on our rating also. So it's very much quite a set threshold in that regard.
And I have two more questions. One is on so we're 6 million favourable at the moment for staff costs. Do you see things like the Holidays Act and redundancies, like in the past has changed, because we can't exactly budget for it to the dollar? Do you see that affecting our end of year financials on the?
Yes, so that might also be something, Councillor, that you wish to ask each of the CCOs individually, but certainly from a group perspective, the Holidays Act payments were provisioned at the end of last year, so we aren't expecting a big change in respect of Holidays Act, and again, redundancies aren't budgeted anyway. So while each of the CCOs might have a different view and the parent on future redundancies, from a group perspective, we are expecting that result to track on.
Yeah, I guess my point with the redundancies, we don't budget for it, but then we do have to spend on it, which then to the public or to someone with the naked eye goes, that's an overspend. But so, well, I guess, yeah. So you think that'll be fine, or we can't actually?
Yep.
Yes, so from a group perspective, Councillor, we know what we know, and it might be that question that you want to place with each of the CCOs and parent, especially regarding their performance on staff costs, and to ask them reliably on where they expect to land for June, and whether that will or will not include any redundancies.
And the last question, and it might be for the CCOs, the variance on the capital, I know it's actually smaller than what has been in the past, but will we see some catch up on that, or is it weather related, or it's just kind of what we generally get?
Yes, so Councillor, you're right on the first point. It is slightly better than we would have previously reported at a Q3 result, percentage-wise against budget. Traditionally, there is a bit of a catch-up in June. You do see, just with where the weather is and the previous results throughout that quarter, that a lot of it is delivered. And again, that would be a great question for each of the parent and CCOs around where they expect to land with their CapEx performance.
Thank you, perfect.
No problem.
So Councillor Hills, just remember the 6 million underspend on staff is not savings necessarily, we can't fill the positions, especially in building consents and planning, so we've got real issues there. Councillor Simpson.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Look, my questions are really, so first of all, congratulations on the good stuff. You know, we always sort of gloss over the good stuff because, you know, we concentrate on the bad stuff, but well done on the good stuff. I'm just doing a bit of a comparison between the update we got for the 6-month comparison and now the third quarter, and heading towards the end of the year. So I'm looking at development contributions. I mean, there's a big change from 16 million to 30 million. Do you see that getting worse?
Yes, Councillor. So again, hate to put that off, but that's another one that might be best placed for the parent. So there is a presentation in the parent about building consents and DC, so it might be best to leave that for there.
Okay, and I just wondered why you changed the language. You used in the 6 months consents, licenses and permits, and you've changed that to fees and user charges.
Yes, Councillor, so it's purely just to be aligned with our financial statements. In the financial statements, we refer to all of that as fees, licenses and user charges.
Right.
But the majority of that variance does come from those particular business activities of consenting.
Okay, and then my last question is on the weather tightness. It hasn't changed at all. So what have we done in the last quarter around that?
So we get an actuarial valuation on weather tightness at half year and full year. So in quarter 3, the only things that we process usually are claims and any large or significant changes to current claims. So we'll know our final position on weather tightness as at 30 June.
Okay.
So over the next month, we'll know where we expect to land.
Right. Because that hasn't actually been highlighted in the report, and there's no change. I didn't realise that. Okay, thank you.
In your report on item 9, paragraph 14, there's a specific reference to regional facilities Auckland revenue, and I know that we're discussing it later, but from a group point of view, and I know that they're offering zoo visitors, lack of conventions, fewer concerts and the like, which of these for you is the most important?
So from a group context, I mean, I'm looking at Kevin, but mostly it is the revenue, because that is how we organise our debt, is the revenue base. So if we are bringing in a lower revenue base than anticipated, then it does have a flow-on effect to our ratios.
The question is, which of the, the reasons for the lower expenditure, which of these, in your opinion, is more important? So it's just, we'll be discussing this later, it just gives me a steer.
Oh, if I can just comment through the chair, though, I think that rather than an opinion, I think there needs to be a question asked of RFA as to which is driving that revenue reduction. The reason we've pointed out at a group level is because the model underlying it, if the revenue streams are coming down primarily through things like events, the cost structure doesn't seem to be flowing and matching that. So it's really a question for them as far as their operating model goes.
But from the figures presented, I don't know which has come down more, if you see what I mean. So which has come down more of all the various reductions, which is the bigger one? I don't know that from what's presented in this report.
Understand your question, Councillor, but I think, you know, at a group level we haven't presented that level of detail around, you know, what's driving each of those revenue reductions. We've only presented that there is a revenue reduction, so certainly a good question for regional facilities.
Okay, thanks.
So in quizzing RFA later, I mean, we've just got to be aware that RFA is in effect our only true business. Everything else is a little bit monopolistic with secure revenue flows, but RFA probably maybe the port, but RFA up and down, just like any private enterprise company. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, and just, I mean, if you look at Panuku, that's 38 million unfavourable, so that's hugely, percentage-wise, much bigger. I just wanted to ask, it's following on from Councillor Simpson's question about weather tightness, and you said you have actuarial assessments, and I know it's not an exact science, but do you think that in our next year-end 19 budget that we're a bit better placed? Because we're 69 million unfavourable, do you think there's ever any chance of getting it closer in assessment? I know it's like a lot, you know, it's like a never-ending piece of string, isn't it? But do you think we might have a better stab at it next year for this coming year?
Yes, Councillor, and through the Chair, what we have done in the LTP is, you know, at each actuarial valuation, the actuary provides us a model of how the cash will come to fruition over the next 10 years, and that has been incorporated into the LTP model. And given as at December, for the first time, we included an actuarial adjustment to the active matter claims, we really do think that we've covered as much of that as we can. That being said, we are in the space of multi-dwelling units where you know, that pattern and that claim history is really just developing. So while we've done everything we can in the LTP and in the current results to match that risk pattern and that exposure, there's still an element of unknown in there as the multi-units unwind.
And the other, just comment, in our reports now we have a risk section, and I'd find it really helpful if we had a risk section in here. Just, I mean, you've probably got it in here, but almost drawing in things like breaching the headroom, you know, those sorts of little things. If they were just bullet points for us, I think it draws my eye, I know, then I can really hone in. It would be wonderful.
Yep. Thanks, Councillor.
Thank you.
Yeah. Our group team will definitely take that on board.
Thank you.
Template that should be followed.
Might not breach them yet.
Thank you. Councillor Simpson raised the question around weather tightness. The last quarterly I asked when a specific report was coming on weather tightness. I thought it was due. When is that report specifically on weather tightness due?
Yes, we've been asked to contribute a workshop on weather tightness, and I think the advisors are just working with the Chair on scheduling that in.
Okay, it's forthcoming. Thank you.
Right, Councillor Simpson and Councillor Casey again, and then
No.
wrap it up. No, Councillor Casey.
Just in response to Councillor Cooper, I didn't single out Regional Facilities Auckland. The report singles it out under paragraph 14, so I'll probably ask the report writer why it was singled out in response to Councillor Cooper, saying why not Panuku?
Yes, so as a group, we consider all of the variances and what's contributing to what we believe to be material variances to the group. And so in our view, we think that the I guess, under revenue provided by RFA or Regional Facilities Auckland is material to the group. So really what we're doing in that front section in the overall performance is really calling out what we think to be material variances, which would be worthy of perhaps some questioning by this committee to each of those CCOs.
Thank you very much.
Right. Well, thank you, team.
Thank you.
Jen. Thank you, Gina. No further questions? Right.
Thank you.
Margaret and Ravine and Brian, welcome. And I'll move the first report, seconded by Councillor Simpson. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? No. Welcome. Thank you for coming. Thank you for turning up.
Good morning. Thank you. Chair, as with previous presentations, we have an overview of quarter 3. What we thought we would do is run through that pretty quickly as we're now in quarter 4. Ravina's got a slide at the end of the presentation looking at the focus for this current quarter. And I thought it would also be useful perhaps just to give you a bit of an update as to where we are with a number of things going on with water care in this current quarter, including some changes to the management team. Also a bit of an oversight and overview of what's happening in the contracting market and contractors and what's happening there. And then you'll all probably be aware that there's a lot of activity at the moment around reviews of what the future of the water sector might look like in New Zealand. So perhaps just touch on that. and also touch on what Watercare is currently doing with Waikato District Council at the moment.
Yeah.
So perhaps we'll take all of that at the end, if we may.
Yep, we'd like to know, yep.
Thank you. So there are 4 strategic measures that Watercare we report on. So I'm just going to go through each one, starting with our customer focus. Excuse me. So one of the strategic initiatives we've got is the digitization of the business. So we are putting more effort into coming up with digital solutions which is available on mobile devices so that our customers and our staff can get information and interact with the company. So during this quarter, we introduced a mobile facility for our customers to report faults online. So it's available on an iPad or a phone. It looks and feels like an app, but it's actually our website available. It's a wrap around our website. And so in the first month, we had a huge take-up. In the first week, it was 18%. And the overall take-up was 32% in that period. So this is without any marketing or raising of the profile. It's just made available. And so if you typed Watercare or fault, the first thing you might see on the phone will be a Watercare fault report. And that's why people have taken up. And we have also put in place applications by developers for making a connection, and they can do that online. And if they're doing works near our assets and they need to notify us, they can do that online now. So basically, the take-up has been extremely good. It's over 20%, and we will continue to promote these devices and install more. The other point I want to highlight is we have partnered with the Utilities Disputes Limited. So Utilities Dispute used to be a statutory organisation set up for customers to put their complaints around energy and telecommunications, but they are now a company, and we have advised them that they will pick up all complaints that our customers make with us. So if they're not happy with us, they'll go to the disputes, Utilities Disputes Group, and they're an independent group. So far, they've only had one dispute that they've looked at, and has been resolved favourably. We've also lodged a book, and I've got copies of them here in case you want a copy. This is the story of water. Copies have been provided at no cost to primary and intermediate schools, and we've brought some copies for yourselves in case you would like to have a photo opportunity in your area with the local school or at the library.
I'm sure we'd love that.
Yes, it has been extremely well received, and we're working on getting this translated into different languages, including Maori, and also converting it into a digital book. And later we may have a story of wastewater as well. It's a story of water. We've been doing some surveys with the Water Services Association of Australia and Water New Zealand on customer satisfaction, and we've ranked extremely well on there. So just moving on to business excellence, our major project, the Central Interceptor, we are on program. My apologies.
One bit further.
Yes, too fast.
One too far. Central Interceptor.
We're so excited about the Central Interceptor, you've just skipped the slide.
Next one.
Right, okay, my apologies. So we're on program with the Central Interceptor. The RFP documents were picked up in May. The tenders close in September. There are 4 consortia who have picked the documents up. It's made up of local construction companies, obviously, but there are the Japanese, the French, the Spanish, and the Italians. They're all in there looking forward to working in Auckland. The Mangere Biological Neutron Removal facility, which was a $141 million project, is now operational. It has come in on budget, in program, and it provides additional capacity for over 250,000 people, as well as improving the quality of the effluent into the Manukau Harbour by removing all the nutrients like phosphorus, nitrogen, and the like.
Well done.
That's very good.
Well done.
So good, extremely good project, yes. And as part of our ongoing training, we've trained over 150 people on leadership so that we can provide better leadership and management within water care. We've also been providing training to staff on agile methodology, how to do things in an agile manner, which is doing things in 6-week scrums and sprints. We have a project called our Strategic Transformation Project, which is underway. And I think at this point I would probably put an invitation to yourselves if you would like to pop in anytime at Watercare and walk through this space where the staff and our suppliers are working in an agile manner. It is quite a fascinating concept. It's very new as to how we deliver projects using the agile methodology. And then in terms of maintenance services, as you're probably aware, we have been struggling with keeping a full complement of our workforce in the field. Hiring and retaining staff is difficult, not just for Watercare, but all our suppliers. And one of the challenges we've got from a health and safety point of view is even when they start, they can't be trained on day one. And so we put them on a training course with Connexus, but it's usually a 3-year program, but the field crew have to know all the elements on day one. So they need to understand the hazards when they're doing excavation, their electrical cables and their other utilities. So we have put together a setup at Mangere where the new recruits are able to physically start digging a mock area, and there will be cables and other utilities. They're not live, so they're not at risk of getting hurt. But it is a real hands-on training facility where they physically dig up, physically reinstate, and then physically do the work. And it has been very well received, and we are making this facility available to our suppliers, and there has been interest shown from Vector, the electricity and other utilities to come in as well. So it's a...
Charge them for that though, won't you?
We will when we get there, yes, absolutely. Any revenue that we can collect, we will be pursuing. In terms of... Oh.
Wrong one.
Right. In terms of financial responsibility, our revenues, we're ahead of budget, and the year-end forecast is that we will be $23 million ahead of budget. Because of that and lower capital spend, we will be better than budget in terms of our debt by 66 million, Brian, is that right? Yeah. And we're continuing to work with Council on the value for money initiatives, including the 3 waters and the communications review. There is a task force, Council task force, that is looking at SIVs, SPVs, and we're working with the task force as to how SPV or SIV could be set up and how it may be used for projects such as the Central Interceptor.
What were those acronyms for? Did you say? Yes.
Oh, SIV, SPV. Okay, the SPV is a special purpose vehicle.
Okay, yeah.
And SIV is a special infrastructure vehicle.
Thanks.
So it's a special purpose vehicle, subset of a special purpose vehicle. And then the Council's sensitive expenditure policy principles that were put out, the board accepted that we will adopt those, so they were adopted as well. In terms of sustainability, we have been doing a number of tours, and in March we had a drop-in for members of the public to come and talk about the proposed Huia upgrade in Titirangi, the new water treatment plant. The Titirangi Protection Group challenged the designation that the council had, so it was a challenge to council as well as Watercare. There was a court hearing, and the court has ruled in favour of council, and therefore Watercare is able to retain the designation. And as far as we are aware, there will be no appeal to this decision.
Good.
So we will progress the application for the Huia treatment plant for the resource consent in the next month. In terms of climate change, we've been working with council, and of course the government has got huge ambitions in this area, and so we will be working with council and the government. We're putting together our climate change strategy, which we will complete in mid-2018. It will be late 2018, and it has a roadmap for how we will meet the zero carbon target by 2050, which is the government's target. Watercare has invested in a few electric vehicles. We don't have a very large fleet, and therefore 30% of that is now electric, which means I think we've got 6 at Newmarket, so 6 cars, which make up 30% of our Newmarket fleet. And then we had a World Water Day celebration, which was attended by a number of members of the public and schools. So in terms of what's coming up, we will have a number of agreements signed with iwi groups. So our target that was set, we're well behind, but we are working positively and proactively with Mana Whenua. We are hoping that we will get a few more signed in the next quarter, in the current quarter. The RFP, as I said, has been picked up, and we will continue to work with the consortia as they put their questions to us. The estimate for each of the consortia is around $3 to $5 million. So that's how much each one of the 4 consortia will spend to put a bid in for the central interceptor. So there's a lot of work going on, and probably it's all contributing to the Auckland economy over the next 6 months. And we completed the Glen Eden wastewater tank, and there's a barbecue planned on 9th June. So those who are available, yes, this coming Saturday, you're welcome. And similarly, we've got an opening schedule for the Fred Thomas wastewater pump station on the 29th of June. With a tour. So as the chair said, I'm going to very briefly take you through some of the changes that I have made at the executive level at Watercare. Firstly, Brian Monk, our CFO, is retiring, so he leaves in July after full service to Watercare, and prior to that to the ATA and the Auckland Regional Council, so we will farewell Brian in July. The incoming CFO is Marlon Bridge, who is currently has been responsible for our customer services group. He will pick up the CFO role from 1st of July. So I've reduced the number of executives that report to me to 7. There are 4 core roles. They are the big, what I call the big ocean liners. The CFO, the Chief Operations Officer running all the operations, the Chief Infrastructure Officer who's responsible for planning and delivery of all the capital projects, and the Chief Customer Officer. So those are the 4 big roles. Then I've got 3 speedboats. So these are smaller, agile roles which are really to shape Watercare for the strategy that we have. So the first one is around talent. It's about people and talent and capability, so that's the Chief People Officer. The second one is around digital and the changing environment around digital technology coming in, so it's the Chief Digital Officer. And the final one is around stakeholder management and communication. So the new roles, all these new roles are being filled by some incumbents from within Watercare and some external parties. So the Chief Operations Officer is an internal promotion. Shane Morgan takes that role. The Chief Infrastructure Officer goes to Steve Webster, who was responsible for the infrastructure projects in Watercare previously, but he picks up planning as well. The Chief Customer Officer is a lady called Amanda Singleton, who comes from, originally from South Africa, senior executive with Telecom there, but has worked with Vodafone, Genesis Energy and others in New Zealand. The Chief Digital Officer is Rebecca Chenery. The Chief People Officer is Jason Glennon, and our Chief Communications Officer is David Hawkins. So at some stage they will become, we will actually introduce them to you at the workshop that's on the 21st of June. So that's the first item. The second thing is around construction and what the market is doing. Council Filipino, you asked about what's happening globally, but locally the market is still very busy. In fact, the contractors requested us to extend the tender period for a number of the projects because they're very busy bidding for work, let alone doing the work. So we've extended, I think, 7 of our projects, given extended bidding period to our contractors. And even when contract is let, a number of the contractors are unable to start on the date that we would like them to start, although they make up time by finishing by the time we want them to finish. So the market is extremely busy. There's a lot of pressure on resources, and it is going to get busier with the proposed investment by like ATAB, the airport, ourselves, and everyone else. There's a lot of work coming our way in Auckland.
Do you want to mention how we're managing the Central Interceptor as a separate project?
Yes, so sorry, thank you, Chair. So the Central Interceptor, because it's such a large project, is being run by a senior manager. It is what we would call a mega project in New Zealand, a billion plus dollar project. So it is being treated as a business, and so it is being managed by a senior executive, Shane Kunis, who used to be my Chief Operations Officer. And he will be running that with his own team, independent from the rest of the business because of probity issues, because we have a lot of interactions with designers and contractors who are involved with the bidding process, and we have to keep the two separate. So we have created a separation of functions there, and he's building his team to deliver that project over the next 6 months, to receive and comment on the inquiries from the consortia, and then when the construction starts, which is early next year, he will probably be physically located in a different office by then. Then I was going to speak about something. What's happening with with the industry. So you would be aware that Minister Mahuta made a statement recently that she's looking at the structure of local government in terms of the delivery of the 3 waters, and so there's a consultation process underway. Last week there was a water summit held in Wellington over 2 days, organised by Local Government New Zealand. I participated in that. Watercare was requested to outline our model, so I outlined the model. The intention wasn't to promote any model, so I wasn't promoting our CCO model, I was just outlining how it works. Wellington Water outlined their model, which is different from our model, and then there was a executive from Tasmanian Water outlining the model that they have put in Tasmania, serving 29 councils. So there's a lot of work going in over the next few months. The Department of Internal Affairs and Local Government New Zealand are being challenged by the Minister to consult and look at what the options could be. So there is going to be changes. We don't know what it is. And the Minister has been at pains to say that she has an open mind. So she's open to what comes from the consultation process.
So I guess the question which we may actually socialise further at our workshop is where could Watercare fit into this? The review is looking at structure, funding, and then the whole piece around regulation. Remembering that this review has been driven off the Havelock North piece. So it may well be that the regulation is quality regulation, but certainly economic regulation has also come up as part of this review. So, as I say, for me, for the workshop that we're having on the 21st of June, it may well be that we will socialise, you know, where should Watercare, and indeed should Watercare play at all in what might happen in the future. And certainly picking up some comments, if Watercare is to play in anything in the future, there has to be a dollar sign attached to it. It's, whilst I'm sure we're all happy that Watercare would share its knowledge and experience, if there are proposals or plans to expand on that, there has to be a separate funding arrangement. There couldn't be any form of cross-subsidy going from Watercare to anywhere else in the country. And as Raveen has said, at this stage, you know, there's lots of speculation. We've heard numbers that, for example, there'll be one water company for the whole country. There'll be 14 water companies for the whole country, and there'll be anything between 1 and 14. For me, I think it is just simply, let's see where we think perhaps we could and should be influencing and playing in that sector.
It's probably going to be somewhere between 1 and 14. One cannot imagine the South Island having its water being run by Watercare Auckland. Not going down well.
I think you could be right.
So,
there, Chair.
could you just, because you'll get questions on this today, but just presumably, you know, a likely proposal, a possible proposal was to work with Waikato District Councils. We're a minimum provider, minimum cost provider. What's their model?
So that's the final thing that I was going to speak on. So Waikato District Council, Hamilton and Waipa, a few years ago, they looked at forming a joint CCO, and then their vision sort of got clouded because they couldn't agree on whether it was an asset owning CCO or not. So Waikato wanted an asset owning CCO, Hamilton didn't want an asset owning CCO, and we're not sure what Waipa wanted. But so in the end, Waikato was going to form its own CCO, but Waikato as a council is too small to have a CCO. I mean, CCOs come with their own costs. So and we were helping them with information on how CCOs run, and Waikato is, of course, one of our customers because we supply bulk water and wastewater services to northern Waikato, Tuakau. So Waikato has consulted through its LTP process on a proposal to contract work to Watercare. And it's a chicken and egg situation because when they spoke to us, we said, and we haven't had a discussion in depth with the board, we didn't know what the form and structure of this proposal is, and neither did they. So they were struggling with the concept, do they consult first and then do the details, or do they do the details and then consult, in which case they'll be accused of having done the deal before they consulted. So they went with, they'll consult first and then they'll talk to us. So the consultation by Waikato has been around, that they would propose for Watercare to provide services on contract, and they're yet to talk to us, and we're yet to put the proposal to the board, and then we will put something to the council depending on what it is that they want us to do. So to answer your question, Waikato District Council has been struggling with retaining resources and retaining contractors, basically. And then also they're faced with huge growth challenges, partially because of what's happening in Auckland, but they're growing elsewhere as well. And so they're looking for a means of having scale so that they can attract and retain staff, which is why they were looking at a joint CCO. They're looking at scale so that they can procure services at better prices, and they're looking at being able to meet the growth from the huge capital investment that they have. So I guess what they will be seeking from Watercare would be more around the talent and the scale that we have in terms of our purchasing power, but we will find out when they approach us formally.
So, and perhaps, Chair, if I could just expand on that. First of all, that Watercare had been engaged with Waikato District long before I came on the scene, so if anyone thinks it's some sort of master plan that I have for world dominance, that's not the case. Secondly, in the letter of expectation going back to 2016-17, CCOs were asked to look at other revenue opportunities, and this would clearly be a revenue opportunity only if the business case stacked up. And of course, as Ravina's also alluded to, that it's been made very clear to Waikato District Council that no agreement or arrangement would be entered into without the full approval from the shareholder.
Well, needless to say, we would be, vigilant to make sure there's no cross-subsidisation or any delay in our own capital program, because that would be two outcomes we would be totally against. Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, and it's always nice to get your questions answered in the presentation as opposed to having to ask themselves. So thank you, and from my perspective, well done. And I'm looking forward to the book. I actually asked yesterday when I saw it on your website, so that's even better. I'm just interested to know when we will have any idea whether there is a viability for alternative funding mechanisms for the Central Interceptor. I know that you've talked about that we're in discussions, but when do you think we'll make a call on that?
So I think we would go into more detail at the workshop on the 21st.
Right.
I think the answer that I would give, and I'll refer to the chair and Brian, is there are lots of little moving parts in this that we need to sort out, not just Watercare, but the government and legislation, and so it's not
easy.
It's not easy.
Okay, fair.
Yeah, and we are very mindful. The board has reminded us that we probably have one opportunity to get this right. If we get it wrong, it will probably shut the door on SPVs forever for everyone else. So we've got to make sure we do it right.
Okay, I'll wait for the workshop.
So perhaps, Councillor, if I could just expand on that, but obviously not going into too much detail ahead of the workshop, that as Ravina said, the devil is in the detail, but certainly if this model works, also referred earlier to the challenges throughout New Zealand for funding of infrastructure. So if we can get this model to work, it certainly opens the door for lots of other opportunities throughout New Zealand.
That one of your new speedboats is a customer stakeholders manager, and I just wondered what sort of brief you've given that person around how to keep the communication, because at the end of the day, people often don't mind as long as they're spoken to. The fact is that they've heard that you're going to get back to them within the next number of days, and if that's pulled out, what do we do about having some sort of communication with the customer?
Very, very good question. So we're moving away. So what we used to have is when customers used to call us, we would say, okay, someone, and depending on what we analyze the problem to be, we would tell them someone will be there within an hour if it is a priority job, or someone will be there within a day or 3 days, or whatever. And we were, my staff who were saying that without any visibility of what the workload was and what the whole spectrum of work, that in 4 days, we will say it's 4 days and not 3 days. And then with the digital solution, where when they log it digitally, they get a response straight away, and then we are able to proactively keep them informed. So the shift is definitely into managing the expectation of the customer rather than following some rule that will be there within an hour or within 6 hours. Some of the challenges have been around not understanding that there could be a tree and we needed an arborist. So we would go out there and shut the water off and then find then we can't do the work. So what we're doing increasingly is not cutting service off, so the customer still has service until we have ascertained exactly how we're going to do the work, which may mean that we're still losing the water. So as long as it's not a major break, it's a small leak, we're managing expectations. So we're doing a number of things. We haven't perfected them, but exactly to meet your suggested outcome, which is to keep the customer informed all the way.
But the promotion is more around digital. We should be encouraging more people to use the digital platform as opposed to ring, because they get a better response. Because the way this is read, it looks as if you're doing it to actually cut the costs. And whilst that's a good thing, I suppose I'm also interested in the effect on the customer. So this is non-urgent. Urgent, put urgent aside, because urgent is urgent. But the non-urgent, I suppose I'm just interested in, I was interested in that. And the way it read that you were doing something because financially it was better for you to take longer to do it. Potentially that's right, but actually what you're really saying is that you've got a better oversight of the reality around that. So I suppose, yeah, I'm just seeing it from the customer's perspective.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, my next question around, you've got obviously a high number of voluntary people leaving the organisation. Where are they going and why? What would be you haven't met that target. So, I mean, is it a competitive environment or why are these people leaving?
Just some were leaving Auckland, so there would be a group that have just left Auckland because it's too expensive to live here, or they're leaving because their partners are leaving and going somewhere else, so they're leaving. Some are leaving for other jobs because they get paid better. So developers are definitely paying far better than anyone else right now. So when we're dealing with engineers and tradespeople, developers are paying extremely well. So they are taking most of the staff. And you can imagine why, because for them, they want to do the development quickly and they can recover their costs. So they're very commercial, the way they're being driven. But there's no one single indicator. A few months ago, 6 months ago, it was mostly because it was very expensive to live in Auckland. That was the single most prevalent reason, but right now I think it's scattered quite a bit.
So you're confident though that you can keep and retain staff enough to do the job that you're supposed to do?
Yes, but I just mentioned we're doing this restructure at the moment, so some of the restructuring is going to result in staff leaving, so they won't be voluntary, but there will be a reduction in staff numbers. So as we put digital solutions and we put some bots in, they're reducing the amount of work that we need humans to do.
Okay.
So there will be a reduction in staff, yes.
And the last measure that wasn't on target is around the average consumption of drinking water. Now, I understand that we've had a really long hot summer, I think we all know that, but what are we doing from a planning perspective to look at maybe the effects of climate change on our weather patterns to make sure that we're prepared for that?
So
planning for the future.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. So I think the target is a long-run target. The challenge we have is we are trying to report it on a monthly basis. And what we have is very accurate demand numbers. So we know what our demand was because we measure it. What we don't have is a very accurate number of what the population is in Auckland. Right, so we're still using the static population. That's not an excuse. So the reality could be that the population is higher than we thought. But to answer your question, we have an initiative to reduce the per capita demand in the long run. So there are a number of initiatives, and we will continue to implement those.
And we
Hey,
should,
Councillor Simpson, I'm sorry, I've got 7 more speakers,
Sorry.
we've got 5 more minutes.
Okay, sorry, forget it.
So, and I think maybe possibly make that 8, right, so, Councillor Stewart.
No, I had 10.
Well, that's one less, Councillor Walker.
Okay, I'll ask all my questions together and you can note them and you'll be able to deal with them more quickly. No particular order. First off, just in terms of land management, we had the earlier incident where the forestry land generated a lot of sediment and the like. Quite obviously, we've seen in the news massive issues around forestry in New Zealand, especially around pine plantings. And obviously the government is making noises about 1 billion trees. It would be of real concern if a lot of them happen to be pine trees on steep land. I just put to you that Watercare may be able to feed some information to the government around that process. So that's rather a suggestion rather than a question. The other question is just around the relationship between the central interceptor, which is a tunnel in terms of tendering and the like, and the CRL, and I don't know whether there's some interface between yourself and AT and whatever's going on around that. Obviously, your tender's coming in ahead of theirs. I note the comments that you make around climate change, and obviously that goes to mitigation. Quite obviously, there's the issue of adaptation as it goes to council and what you're doing in that area. And then lastly, there's the issue around how you were assisting healthy waters, particularly around contracts that go to stormwater. Now, I don't necessarily need a response to that now, Mr. Chair. I'm quite happy to have the response after if it's more efficient.
Yep, I think it's more efficient because actually quite a few of them are non-financial related, and this is F&P,
Sure.
so just...
Trying to be expeditious, Mr. Chair?
No, it's noted. Councillor Newman.
Yeah, hi. Look, I'm happy to get the answers in slower time and come and see you about this, but the review of water service provision, very interesting, and I would be interested to know what views, if any, the board and senior management of Watercare have in relation to the future of Section 57 with respect to the economic regulation of price and the prohibition of distribution of dividends. I don't think there's an appetite in the community to reorganise the balance sheet for the purpose of paying dividends to shareholders, but at the same time I also think that if some units of local government had to comply with the economic regulations that apply to Watercare, they just simply wouldn't cope. So if there has been some work done within Watercare to inform its own thinking about these things, I'm certainly keen to come and learn more about that. So don't have to have an answer today, but I will come and talk to you about it offline.
Councillor Newman, we will take that up through the workshop as
Yep,
well, so that'll be an opportunity to have that discussion.
Yep,
Okay.
we want the answer on the 21st, I should
21st,
say.
yeah.
Councillor Hobbs.
Thank you, and I think the workshop is the place for the wider discussions. I just wondered, the lack of spend and the capital spend, we've got, I think, a good explanation on page 47. Just a quick question though, however, is there the opportunity to be agile and fleet of foot, and when we are having trouble with the tender in one direction, to actually redirect that money into smaller issues? We are having, with the increased rainfall, we are having quite a lot of sewer overflows.
Yeah, so I think the approach that we are taking in Watercare, and the chair may want to comment on this, is that we're not spending the money to meet the budget. We are making sure that the risks and the outcomes that we are trying to achieve is being achieved. But you are absolutely right that if we know that something needs to be done, and the resources are available and the funding is available, then let's bring that forward. And we do that. We do that. And they're easier to do with the smaller projects, as you mentioned, than with the bigger ones. So yes, we do.
And I'm very glad, and I appreciate the Chief Executive and the Chair raising the review of water. It's of huge concern to me. This is nothing new. We know that the discussions have been happening in Wellington for the last 20 years around this. It's now coming to a head, and it's a little bit disconcerting when I'm in Wellington to be told what Auckland is planning, and I think we just need to line up and get on the same page on this, because on behalf of our ratepayers, and I think the Chair's put it very well, the cross-subsidy issue is a real concern, and believe you me, the government has no problem with cross-subsidisation, and I think as Aucklanders we need to just get on the same page, and we will talk about this at the workshop, but I'm very concerned that we've sort of run ahead of ourselves in this discussion a little bit. We need to catch up, and we also need to talk about our collective approach to this, what we're going to say collectively to government and to the water industry and to our fellow councils, and we also need to work out our collective stance on a water regulator, and I think we just need to take time to join up, because we are not joined up at the moment. So the workshop will be appreciated. Thank you.
Certainly, Councillor Hulse, that's the view of the board and management, that we need to work with our shareholders, and it's certainly not something that Watercare has got got a banner for doing X, Y, or Z, we have to look at, as I said earlier, what role, if any, should Watercare play in this review and the outcomes of that review.
Councillor Darby.
Thank you. Well, first acknowledgement to Brian. Brian, bit of a surprise, but you know, life changes, and you've been in your position a long time through a lot of restructuring and changes. So, just want to acknowledge
Thank you.
the really important work that you've undertaken leading up the financial division in support of Ravine, Margaret, and ultimately us and the people of Auckland. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Just a couple of quickies. On the IGC front, 1 July, you're updating your IGC numbers, your charges, and your water supply and wastewater charges, and that's advertised yesterday. And it's about 3% on both sides of the ledger. With that update, do the IGC charges, we know that they don't reflect the true cost of the connection. So what percentage is the IGC charge of the real cost of a new connection?
Right. It's about 70% at the moment, so there's approximately a 30% subsidy across all Aucklanders in their water and wastewater charges towards our growth capital expenditure.
So is the board and management advising the board to transition to full cost? And what is that transition timeline before we get to 100% recovery through the IGC?
Okay, so we're not planning to get to 100 exactly, because at that level I think we expose ourselves to challenge around how do you define growth capex. So we're looking into the 90s. We'll be there in the period of the LTP, so by around year 6 or 7 we'll be in the 90s, and in fact I think there's a couple of years in our LTP where we project no price increase because we get to that point and we don't want to exceed it. So we are on a climb to that as we speak. You may recall some years ago we were increasing the IGC at about 20% per annum, and that was to play catch up, and then we got to a point where we figured that we will now progressively, particularly with the higher volumes of IGCs out there, move closer towards the full recovery.
Okay.
We're looking at income from IGCs next year just a little bit shy of $100 million.
100 million, okay. And just, does the IGC take into account, say, infrastructure like the Rosedale plant, which is sort of fully funded by a previous entity, with debt carried over, of course? Does it factor in that capital spend that maybe, if you take an example, say for the Whenuapai Greenfields area, does it take into account that capacity that is being used, which has been provided for by others that paid? Does it capture that, or does it only capture, the new demand on the arterial and local supply network?
No, it does tend to, firstly, any forward capital expenditure that is based primarily around growth gets added into the computation of the IGC. But we also look back, so in the case of the IGC for the metro area, we look back 4 years worth of growth spend, and we look forward 11 years. So we've got a full 15-year span, and we see that as being a reasonable length of time that on average over life represents the level of money that is going into to growth expenditure.
That's good. And one last question, because we're short on time. The Utilities Disputes Limited company that you're going to be using, now the former ACT MP Heather Roy is the sole shareholder of that, but my understanding is this is somehow linked to a minister's decision. It's not.
I can answer that.
Because there's reference in their constitution to a minister's direction, and I'm just trying to understand how this entity exists and why you chose it, and how the complainant goes to it, when I think you would probably be paying the bill for the arbitration.
Yeah, so you're right. I think originally it was a government-initiated
It was the old Electricity Commission.
Sorry, I was a member of this board, so I can probably fill you in, and I helped develop this new company. But it was the Electricity and Gas Complaints Commission, and it operates under the Minister of Consumer Affairs. It's got a different name now, but it was initially for electricity and gas complaints, independent, set up by the government, and it still is under the oversight of the Minister of Consumer Affairs.
It is under the
And it's only one shareholder because of the way it was set up. It's not owned by anybody.
So even though it's a private entity, it's reporting up to not a company that's going to receive a dividend or anything like that.
No.
It's an.
And I think, Councillor Darby, it goes to a comment the Chair made earlier about being a monopoly, and it's always, from my perspective, good that a customer has another option or alternative rather than feel, well, if they're not happy with the response, where do they go? And this actually provides that avenue as well.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Councillor Casey.
Oh, the good thing about waiting is all your questions get answered, so I've only got 2 left. And I don't mind if I get them over the counter here, or you have to give me some information. First of all, 2 ticks. I was delighted, and it's about ticks. I'm delighted that you're reaching out for the rainbow tick, and you're also helping Auckland Transport set up their own rainbow network, which is fantastic. And you joined us in the Pride Parade, so that's just great. I also like reading about all the local board projects, which you list now just as a matter of course, which is also good. My 2 questions relate to, one's always the Central Interceptor. I'm interested in the 4 contractors and what their routes are. I tried to Google them, but found them all mostly overseas. Any of them totally overseas, or have they all got New Zealand partners? So you can send me what you know. I'm just interested in who we're looking at.
We can send you, yeah.
Yep. And my other one was, you're kind of beating your chest a wee bit about the water survey done, but I don't think that 1,642 respondents is terribly many in relation to your customer base. So I'd kind of like to know who were they, how were they chosen, what was all that about? Because you've mentioned it 3 different places in your report.
So I think, no, that's a very good...
to do it now, and you can just send me the stuff. I'm interested in reading about it. Thank you.
I think it's the challenge of having good benchmarks as well, so.
It's an approximation of the truth.
You heard it here.
Councillor Cooper.
Thank you. First of all, I wanted to just congratulate you on the way you've conducted the project in Gleneden. It's been a long, difficult project, especially with traffic management. Round and round in circles, round the big block, but I think it's been a good, and thank you for having the thank you barbecue on Saturday. I think the community appreciate it. I just basically wanted to also congratulate you because I was a member of the Electricity and Gas Complaints Commission for about 4 years, and just before I finished up, I decided to finish up when they changed to utility disputes. We went through the whole process of developing this because then it could be opened up to water and broadband, and actually I know that the former commissioner came to meet maybe with you, or Watercare at least, several years ago because I felt that it was a good body to use. I know that some of our councillors weren't too happy with often complaint resolution and things like that, so I think this is a really good move. If anybody wants to look at the website, the quality of the dispute resolution staff is of a very high standard, and they actually teach around the country. And I think it's a really good way, it's actually a more cost-effective way than people having to go directly to Ombudsman if they're not satisfied with you. It's more timely for you and cost-effective, and there are real time limits on when these complaints are resolved. So I'm very comfortable. The board is a very good board as well, and the staff are high calibre, and the commissioner. So I think that this is a really good move to have an independent eye over it, you know, rather than go the hard-hitting, you know, which is really difficult for customers as well to go to the Ombudsman. It's a really difficult process. This is a simple...
For councillors as well.
No, but this is simple, you know, ring up, hello, and they've got highly trained dispute resolution people at the other end. So I really congratulate you for taking that on. That's a sign of good faith with customers as well, so thank you very much. Yeah, and it is overseen by the Minister of Consumer Affairs, and they can demand a report at any time.
Kia ora, Mr. Chairman. Miki ana kia koutou tēnei wā. Just a question on page 3 of your report, second last paragraph talks about continue to work closely with the the council and other CCOs to ensure the vision for the city is achieved, including a number of improvements to Māori outcomes. Is there anything over and above what has already been provided on your report on page 19 and 20? So there's some stuff there that you've got, but I mean, that's a great statement, and I'm all for it. But I guess I'm just questioning whether there's more that you could provide that's not in this report that relates to that paragraph on page 3.
We can, so, and we will. For example, this morning we've got an innovation exhibition at Mangere Wastewater Treatment Plant where we are working with one of the iwi groups on wastewater technology, which is so we'll come back to you.
Yes, so because of timing, just if you can, that would be great. And the other one is the Māori responsiveness plan. Has it gone to the board yet? Has it been confirmed? Yep. Thank you.
Right, to wrap it up, Councillor Filipina.
Thank you, Chair. Look, just congratulations on the biological nutrient removal facility and attending it on Friday. So congratulations on that. And also, and you put it into the report, around factoring 250,000 people, and it's there to at least cater for the expansion of Auckland, Tamaki Makaurau as a region. So congratulations for that. The other one, Chair, and this is the last sort of comment I'll be making, is around the initiative, and you've mentioned it as with the agreement signing with Ngāti Paua, but I found out on Friday at the launch, is that you've got Te Wānanga o Aotearoa classes coming into your facility there, so congratulations for that, you know, just on your te reo classes, because I think it is important. We've spoken about interaction with the community, and I think that's just another aspect, so congratulations on those two fronts. Kia ora. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, thank you for your presentation. I just have a question based on customer focus, but it's not mentioned in the report, and it was just around your water utility, what is it? Water care funded water utility customer assistance trust, just the uptake of that, and I don't need it now, I can wait till, you just email it.
We'll get back to you on that one.
Chair, can I have I've got a question for you. In regards to the workshop with water care around the issues that we're looking at with 17A, I think, is where the possible joining of stormwater, wastewater, is that where we're heading to the workshop around that?
No, that's not for that workshop. I think it's going to be mostly water issues.
Yes, it would be more scene setting and what's happening.
Plus the central interceptor and the special purpose vehicle. So.
Okay, so that'll come back, not to a workshop, but to...
Well, 17A, there's a reporting mechanism for the...
There's the 17A and the Three Waters, it's council-led. My understanding is that the time frame to come back on that specific issue is towards October.
Okay, cool.
It's a while away.
And through the Appointments and Performance Committee.
If I can just add through the chair, there will be a progress update on the 7th. So it's actually basically tomorrow there'll be an update on that particular review as to where it's got to. But it is October that the actual result of the review will be due.
And from the Appointments and Performance, it'll come back to here?
The progress update will go to Cabinet Performance Review and Value for Money Committee. It won't go any further than there. If there's any decisions to be made, they will go through to governing body for...
So there's governing body.
Yep.
That's where the decision will be made. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Margaret, I think on the 21st it would be useful that there's also a mini co-presentation by staff here as to what it does to our balance sheet if we did have the central interceptor parked away somewhere else. So, because really that's a very fundamental question and understanding for councillors to know what that means, because that is the huge thing for us if we can just clear a bit more headroom there. Right, well, Thank you, Margaret, and thank you, Ravine, but special thanks to Brian, and we do
Yeah,
have
Brian, well
a
done.
resolution there, Brian, where you've been with us since, in one form or another, since 2004, at the ARC and then the transition agency, but sincere thanks and from many of us. We've got the resolution moved, seconded by Councillor Darby, but we don't know whether it is retirement or on the partly something else, but whatever, enjoy the break.
Well, you never know. But at age 69, 5 days a week is getting a bit much.
Go and buy a bicycle.
Right, well,
Go
councillors
riding.
like you to, we'll you put your hands together and that will actually move that resolution.
And we'll leave the books for distribution.
Thank you very much.
Yep. Okay, and we will take a 5-minute break before we have RFA up here.